Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Question 44. Okay, so let's try to understand the question and try to answer the correct option for this. So we have here, we have in front of us, okay, this question. We will try to analyze the question and answer it as well. Okay, let's see why is option 5 is the correct option. First of all, let's try to understand the problem and then try to figure out why it is that way. Okay, let's do it. Okay, step number 1, trying understanding the problem. Okay, it says refer to the exhibit. A network administrator is verifying the configuration of Inter-VLAN routing. Users complain that PC2, which is this here, cannot communicate with PC1. Okay, this PC2 user, he is not able to talk to PC1 based on the output, which is this here. Based on the output, what is the possible cause of the problem? Okay, let's first understand the problem. Okay, we have here router on stick, or what we call ROSA, and this between router 1 and the switch. Okay, so router 1, okay, it's connected via gig 0/0, and it's connected directly to switch on gig 1/1. PC1 located on VLAN 10 and PC2 located on VLAN 20. Of course, PC1 is connected on the fast Ethernet 0/1 and PC2 connected on port fast Ethernet 0/15, and that's for us is not an issue. This 2 port is not an issue. User complained that PC1 and PC2 are not communicating or unable to communicate each other. The goal here is that we need to find the mistake in the router configuration that prevents inter-VLAN routing. Now let's check each possible option one by one. Okay, option 1 says gig 0/0 is not configured as a trunk port. Gig 0/0, which is this here on router 1, is not configured as a trunk port. In router on stick or ROSA, the physical interface, the gig 0/0, is divided into sub interfaces. G 0/0.5, which is here, and G 0/0.20, which is right here. Okay, so in this case, each sub interface is assigned to a VLAN using encapsulation.1q VLAN ID. If you look at here, interface gig Ethernet 0/0.5, it's encapsulation.1q5, and the IP address is provided as following: 172.16.10.254, and the subnetting is just 24/24. The same for gig Ethernet 0/0.20, then it's encapsulation.1q20. The IP address is 172.16.20.254, and the subnetting is 20/24. Okay, So each sub interfaces is assigned to VLAN using encapsulation.1q VLAN ID. For this to work, the switch port connected to gig 0/0 must be trunk port. The gig 0/0, this between these two, must be a trunk port. If it is left as an access port, the router will not receive multiple VLAN tags, and routing between VLAN will fail. Of course, will fail. So, if the switch port fast Ethernet 0/1, which is this, in diagram is not trunking VLAN communication, fail. So if the switch port F01 in the diagram is not trunking with this, so it is fail. So let me ask you a question. Could you explain to me why the switch port connected to gig 0/0 must be trunk for router on a stick to work? Again, explain to me why the switch port gig 0/0, which is in the router here, must be trunk on a router on stick to work. Provide me your answer later. Okay. Now, for the second option, it says the command interface gig Ethernet 0/0.5 was entered incorrectly. It was entered incorrectly. Actually, in ROAS, sub interfaces are created using the command interface g or gig e 0/0.x, where x is the sub interface number, not necessarily the VLAN number, but it is the sub interface. Okay. Now, in our case here, the sub interface is 0.5 and the sub interface for the second VLAN is 0.2020. So that's representing VLAN 20, and this is representing VLAN 10. Okay. So this means the engineer used sub interfaces number 5 here and number 20, okay, and that's could result into a contradiction. So the command, so this command is not technically incorrect, but it may cause confusion for admin. This command 0.5 and the VLAN is 10, that could confuse the admin. So it is recommended that we put 0.10 as we did for the VLAN here, 0.20. So VLAN 20, the sub interface must be 0.20. The same for Giga Ethernet, 0. should be 0.10. However, it is not the cause of the problem, but it is confusing the admin. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Is it true or false? If I ask a question, you answer me later on in a private. Is it true or false? The sub interface number, which is this 0.5 and 0.20, must always be the same as the VLAN ID for the rows to work. Is that false or true? I don't want to see your answer now. You can just private me and answer me later on. Okay. In the third option, it says here, there is no IP address configured on the interface gig E0/0. It says here, there is no IP address configured on the interface gig E or gig Ethernet 0/0. So it means this port, there is no IP address configured to it. Is that correct? Let's think about it and let's analyze. In router on stick, the physical interface, which is this 0/0, is giving no IP address. Instead, they give it they give in each for each VLAN its own IP address. So for the gig Ethernet 0/0.10 and the gig Ethernet 0/0.20, which is this two here, its own IP address, and that's how it was configured here. When we put this command, okay, it means that we have entered this sub interface, and now we assign that this IP address and subnet mask to this sub interface. Okay. These IPs actually act as a default gateway. So these are the default gateway for the devices in each VLAN. Okay, let's move on, okay, and see if we need to go to next option, or we still need to clarify the option number 3. So this point here, there's no IP address configured on the interface gig Ethernet 0/0. That is correct. So these 3 options are still correct. They are not causing any problem to the point. They are not causing any problem of the communication between PC2 and PC1. Okay. So this sounds good, and let me ask a question for this option here. The question is very simple. Also, you may answer it later on or private me if you cannot answer it. The question says, why do not we assign IP address directly to the physical interface gig Ethernet 0/0 and router on a stick? Why do not we assign a private IP address or a gateway IP address directly to the physical interface gig E 0/0 and router on a stick? I'll see your answer later. Okay, let's move to the 4th option. Okay, the 4th option, it says the no shutdown command is not entered on sub interfaces. That could be also a possible. If no shutdown command is not entered properly on the sub interfaces, that also could cause a problem. Okay, now let's explain this point. By default, when you create a sub internet, by default, when somebody creates a sub interface, they are administratively down state. By default, they are down state by administration. So they are in administratively mode as a down state. Okay, so it is must that the configuring person or the engineer to enable it. And how to enable it is just you do a no shutdown command. Once you add no shutdown command, it will automatically run your ports. But there is a key here. There is a key on this point. If the main physical interface, the gig Ethernet 0/0 is shut down, this one, we're talking about this point here. If it is shut down, all sub interfaces by default will be down as well, even if you type no shutdown under the each sub interface. So normally the engineers or the designer or the configures technician apply no shutdown on the physical interface only, the main interface only, but not in each sub interface VLAN. Okay, so let me ask a question, and I will need to see your answer later on, but not in today's lesson. Okay, if you have a difficulty answering these questions, you just private me. I will try. I'll be very happy to answer you all my best I can. The question is, if the physical interface on the router, the gig Ethernet 0/0, is shut down if the physical interface gig E or gig Ethernet 0/0 here, we're talking about this point, is shut down, what will happen to the all sub interface, the gig E 0/0.5, which is this, and the gig E 0/0.20, which is this, and this belongs to different VLAN. This is VLAN 10 and this is VLAN 20. What would happen to those sub interface? You may answer me in the private and we can see your answer. The last option and the correct option, it says, the option here says the encapsulation.1q5 command contains the wrong VLAN. Okay, the encapsulation.1q5 command contains the wrong VLAN. Let's explain that and let's understand this point. Okay, this is the most critical issue in the configuration. If we look at the diagram, we look at PC1, this one here, this gentleman is on VLAN 10, right? If you say VLAN 10, but the router sub interface, it says 0/0.5 encapsulation, it gave it .1q5. Look at here. Okay, so that means the router the router here, our router here, R1, is expecting VLAN 5 traffic but not VLAN 10. You see that? Okay, so we're supposed to configure this as VLAN 10 but not VLAN 5. Even if we gave it 0/0.5, that's not an issue, that's confusion for the administrator later on. The good designer should do it 0/0.10 but not 0/0.5. Technically it will work, but technically it will work fine, but it's not a good designer. So the major problem now, those two guys are not able to talk to each other because of the .1q 10. That's supposed to be 10, not 5. So in order to correct this configuration, we should go again into the interface gig Ethernet interface 0/0.5, and we encapsulate doing it this way, .1q 10 instead of 5, and we assign the IP address and the subnet mask as provided here. Okay, so the real cause of the problem is the encapsulation.1q5 command that contains wrong VLAN. Okay, let me give you a quiz, a quick quiz. Okay, and I may see your answer later on the private. If you have a difficulty to answer it, just let me know. If PC1, this gentleman here, this guy here sitting here, if PC1 in VLAN 10, what should the exact configuration line under the router sub interface? If this guy wants to fix his problem, what should he do in his command in order to fix the command correctly? You may answer it later on. So this is the best explanation that I can explain. Let's see the explanation here, what it says in the answer. The explanation says, in router on stick, the sub interface configuration should match the VLAN number in the encapsulation command. In this case, the command encapsulation.1q10 should be used for the VLAN 10. Since in sub interface are used, there is no need to configure the IP on the physical interface gig Ethernet 0/0. So the trunk mode is configured on the switch port that connects to the router. The sub interfaces are turned on when they are added. Okay, so let's move to the next question.